All right, we are on your last lesson for the week. Lesson 4 is 8-5, so make sure you're there in your SAB. But I also might want to suggest you might want to open to a blank page in your SAB. There are a bunch in the back, I think maybe in the front too. But there are a bunch of blank pages that you can use for like note-taking. And we're going to draw something to start today as a reminder for you of how to measure liquid volume. So if you will go there, I think, if I remember correctly, you guys had done this, because when I did it with the 4th graders, I think I remember you totally remembering this. So that's really good. But I'm going to draw just a visual representation of how you convert liquid measurements in our customary system. And that is by remembering that you have the land of gallon. I sometimes call it glassy land, but the land of gallon is going to work just great. And the way that I remember it, it's okay if you have a different way, but the way I remember it is that inside the land of gallon, there are 4 queendoms. So I'm going to draw 4 queens there. It's okay if they don't perfectly fit. And every queen had 2 princes. How convenient. And every prince was really, really a big fan of chocolate chip cookies, and he couldn't sleep every night unless he had 2 chocolate chip cookies. And he was a really picky prince. Each and every one of these princes were very, very picky, and they could only eat the chocolate chip cookie if it had 8. I'm not going to be able to fit those on there. If it had 8 little chocolate chips. Okay, so if they had 8 little chocolate chips, let's see if I can fit. You'll just remember that little purple dot stands for 8. Okay. Now, the way that this helps us is it helps us to remember what those conversions are. The G, we stood it for gallon land, but it really stands for just gallon. And then the Q is for quart. So the G is for gallon. The Q is for quart. The P is for pint. The C is for cup. And the 8 is actually for ounces, which might help. Okay, so the way that we work this is in 1 gallon, there are 4 quarts. In 1 gallon, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pints. In 1 gallon, there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 cups. And in 1 gallon, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 times 8 ounces, however many that is. And you can also use this to help you another way. So if somebody said something like, okay, you have 2 quarts, how many pints is that? You could say, okay, well, that's 2 queendoms, and every queen had 2 princes, so that would be 4 pints altogether. Okay, so this is just a really awesome visual representation of how to do some of these conversions. But I also want to show you that you have all of that information here as maybe a helpful guide too, because they're also showing you that sometimes you might have not a full gallon. So you might have only a quarter of a gallon. Well, if I had a quarter of a gallon and I was using this, that would be like splitting my queendom up into 4 equal pieces, right? So this little conversion chart will also be really helpful for you today, but I like to think of my little gallon land as well, okay? So it wants us to talk first about some fractions, which are the harder part of doing these conversions. And it says, what fraction of 1 gallon is 3 quarts? Well, how many quarts are there in a regular gallon? There are 4, and it tells us here that we have 3 of them. So that would be 3/4 of a gallon. And then it says, what fraction of 1 quart is a pint? Okay, well, how many pints are there in a quart? There are 2, and this tells me that I have 1 pint, so that would be half. Then this says, what fraction of 1 quart is a cup? Okay, well, how many cups were there? How many chocolate chip cookies were there in our story? There were 4 chocolate chip cookies in a quart, because there was 2 princes. And then 1 cup would be 1/4. And then it says, what fraction of 1 gallon is 3 pints? Ooh, okay, so that's one where we might actually want to look at this. It says 3 pints would be 1, 2, 3, but how many pints were there altogether in a gallon? There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So altogether, that would then leave us with 3/8 of a gallon. Okay? So now let's talk about converting to smaller or to larger. This is again where this gallon land can be kind of helpful for you. So that's always a good visual to keep nearby if you were able to draw it, if you wanted to. So this one's asking you to go from quarts to cups. Well, quarts are bigger than cups, so you're going to have more of those cups. That's where it says you're converting to a smaller unit, which means you'll end up with more of the small unit. So there are 4 cups in a quart. If you remember our picture, this is 1 quart right here. And I had 1, 2, 3, 4 cups, okay? So because of that, that means that I am going to multiply this number by 4, which tells me that I had 48 cups. The opposite of that is if you went from something like pints to gallons, right? So here you'd have to say, okay, in the entire gallon land, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pints. So that's going to help you there. So because of that, you're going to end up with a smaller number here, since this is your, there would be a smaller measurement going into a bigger thing that you measure by. So you'd divide by 8, which would give you 13 gallons altogether. So that's the work we're going to do down here for 5 through 13. Number 5 wants you to go from cups to quarts. So you have to ask yourself which one is the smaller unit. Your cups is the smaller unit, which means you are converting to a larger unit of measurement. So that means that this number is going to be smaller, which means you'll divide. So how many cups are there in a quart? Well, let's go back and look. In 1 quart, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 cups. So that means I'm going to divide this by 4, which will give me 5 quarts. Next, I'm going from pints to gallons. I definitely know that pints are smaller, so this one I'm going to end up doing the opposite. So I'm going to multiply by this. So in 1 gallon there were 8 pints, and so then I need to multiply by 8 to tell me that there are 16 pints in 2 gallons. Number 17, you're going from quarts to cups. Quarts is your bigger measurement, so because of that you are converting to a smaller unit, which is this guy right here. So that means that I am going to multiply, but you need to know how many cups there are in a quart. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 cups in a quart, so I'm going to multiply this by 4 to give me 60 cups altogether. Okay, this time I'm going from cups to pints. That means I'm going from a smaller measurement to a larger measurement. So because of that, I am going to divide. So I'm going to divide 3. And it wants to know if 3 cups, how many pints that would be. Well, there are 2 cups in a pint. So because of that, you're going to end up with a fractional part here. And that's basically going to be 1 1.5, because you're going to divide this by 2. So there are 2 cups in a pint, so you would divide it by 2, and that'll give you 1.5 pints. I am going, this time, even though this number's first, I'm really going that way. So I'm going to go from 48 quarts to gallons. Well, quarts are my smaller measurement, and I'm going to be dividing into a larger unit. So that means I'm going to divide, and I need to know how many quarts there are in a gallon. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 queendoms in the land of gallons, so I'm going to divide by 4, which tells me 12 gallons. I've got 144 cups, and I want to know how many gallons that is. So again, 144 cups is going to be my smaller measurement that I'm converting to a larger unit, which means I'm going to need to divide. But I need to know how many cups there are in a gallon. So I come over here, this is the entire land of gallon, and there were 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 cups. So I'm going to divide this by 16. And 144 divided by 16 is 9. All right. 11, 12, and 13 are a little trickier because they're not, easy numbers to work with, but you're still doing the same work. I'm going from pints to quarts. This is a smaller to a larger unit, so there will be division. However, this is what I actually know, so I'm really going from quarts to pints, which means I'm going to multiply. So how many pints are there in a quart? There are 2, so I'm going to times this by 2, which would end up giving me 5. Sorry, I'm having hiccups like usual. Okay, this time I'm going from pints to cups, which is going to be a smaller unit, which is right here, which means I'm going to multiply. And there are 2 cups per pint, so I'm going to times that by 2 to give me 46. And then finally, this last one, I'm going from gallons to quarts. Gallons is a larger measurement, and I'm going into a smaller one, so I'm going to times it. And there are 4 quarts in a gallon, so I'm going to times it by 4. So 1 times 4 is 4, and then half of 4 is 2. So then 4 plus 2 would be 6. Okay, let's see how many word problems I can get through before my time is up today. I'm going to start with 14. It says a muffin recipe requires 2 3/4 cups of milk. What amount of milk do you need to make double the number of muffins? Well, that's easy enough. You're just doing this number times 2, which is really just your knowledge of multiplying fractions, right? So there's a couple things you could do, but the easiest way we've been doing it is 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 3 is 11. So your 2 3/4 is really 11/4. And then I'm going to times that by 2. The good news is that I can actually cross cancel before I divide here. Or, excuse me, before I multiply. So then 11 times 1 is 11. 2 times 1 is 2. So I really have 11 halves. The problem is that we don't write it like that. So 2 goes into 11 5 times. And then 11 minus 10 is 1. So I am really going to be making 5, or I really need 5.5 cups of milk. It's okay if you wrote down 5 2/4 cups of milk, but that is how much you will need. Okay, so we got 5.5 cups. All right, a recipe requires, let me erase this so I have room to work. A recipe requires 3/4 cup of water. Farha has a measuring cup that is marked only in ounces, but she knows that 8 ounces is equivalent to 1 cup. How many ounces of water will she add to the mixture? So we're basically trying to convert 3/4 of a cup into a certain number of ounces, okay? So if she's telling you that 1 cup equals 8 ounces, we need to basically multiply this times those 8 ounces. Okay, so we're going to multiply this. We're going to find 8 ounces of 3/4, and if you'll remember, of means times here. So we can actually cross cancel first. Make that a 2, make that a 1. 2 times 3 is 6, so that means that she needs 6 ounces. Now, in order to check to see if this is reasonable, I want you to think about what's going on here. We know that I'm going to have less than 8 ounces because I only have 3/4 of a cup, which is less than a cup. And if I were to also think about splitting up that 8 ounces into 4 equal groups, that would have given me 2 ounces per quarter cup, and I had 3 of those. So you don't have to write anything, just kind of an idea of how we would have solved that problem. Okay, probably not last one. We'll see. Well, let's try to go ahead and solve this next one. It says a serving size for a pineapple orange punch is 1/2 cup. Liam needs to make 72 servings of punch. Oh, I erased part of our work. Okay. And then it says he will use 8 pints of pineapple juice. The rest is orange juice. How many pints of orange juice does he need to make the punch? Well, we got to start here first. If he's going to have a 1/2 cup and he wants to make 72 servings, we need to figure out how many cups of punch that is altogether. Well, so that's basically just finding 1/2 of 72. So 1/2 of 72 is going to be 36. So I know that he is going to be making 32 servings of punch, right? So then it says he will use 8 pints of pineapple juice. Well, we got to be careful. This is 36 cups, and it looks to me like we maybe need to convert that into pints, right? So if I had 36 cups, I am trying to go from 36 cups to a certain number of pints. Well, that means I'm converting it to a larger unit of measurement, which means I'm going to divide. So I need to remind myself how many cups there are in a pint, and there are 2 cups. So I'm going to divide this by 2, and that helps me realize that I have 18 pints of juice, okay? So now that I have 18 pints of juice, it says he will use 8 pints of pineapple juice, and the rest is orange. So how many pints of orange? Well, that's easiest of all. 18 minus 10 is 8. Nope, I already solved the problem in my head. 18 minus 8 is 10. So 10 will tell you the amount of pints of OJ that he needs for this recipe. Okay? That was kind of a tricky one. I don't have time to go through these 2, but if you wanted to do them as good practice, it's totally up to you. But these are the answers, so you could at least check to see if your answer works great. This one was 14 gallons, and then this one down here is 3 blue walls and 1 white wall. And it says also that you needed 1 3/4 quart of blue paint. And then it looks like 2 1/4 quarts of white paint. Okay, That looks like a tricky one. I'm guessing you didn't do it, which is fine. Okay, guys, your options today are homework and remembering or IXL, since I did most of that SAB with you. But please, 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 I know it's the end of the week and you're done with your math, but if you can do a little bit more practice, that would be great. Log into Zoom if you have no clue what we did today. Good luck.